Welcome back to episode 18 of the Rally Report podcast. Going to be previewing the CSA Individuals tournament, which is coming up this Friday to really wrap up the CSA season. And I actually got a legitimate expert to do this episode with me who can provide actual insight on the strengths and weaknesses of the contenders of this tournament instead of me just talking nonsense without any credibility. But to introduce today's guest, he's probably been on the highest demand from my viewers. He's currently the assistant coach for Penn, or as Ali Abu would say, the mastermind behind Penn's success, and is a former professional, 5-time Scottish national champion, and was the national coach for Scotland, and just has an immense resume that I hope I'm not missing out on too much. But welcome to the pod, Stuart. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Sean. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So just wanted to, before we go on, how's the team morale been since the tough for the men's, especially?
That's an interesting question.
Have you guys, have they been training after for individuals?
Yeah, we started training again. We're recording on Tuesday, leading up to the individuals this weekend. We gave them basically a week last week to do their own thing. Some of them came down and hit a little bit. Some of them just took the week off. I think mentally more than anything they needed that break. But we started back up yesterday. We had a session yesterday and then again today. We'll have a couple of light sessions tomorrow and Thursday just to taper and get ready for the weekend. But they seem like, I'm actually surprised how well they seem to have come back. I'm not going to lie, the first couple of days were rough after last Sunday. So I think they needed that break. Me personally, I enjoyed having the women's championships last weekend to sort of focus on that last week and kind of not forget about the men's team championships, because I think it's going to take more than a few days to forget about it. But just being around the women, they were obviously really excited to prepare for their national championships. So that helped me just to be around them. They're a great group and a lot of positivity with them. And then we actually had a pretty good weekend up in Harvard. Went in, seeded 8th and not expecting too much, and then managed to get an upset over Colombia, who had a couple of issues going on, to say the least, and we ended up finishing 6th. So
so wanted to ask you how you feel about this individuals tournament in general.
I think it'll be a great tournament overall. I think it will highlight the strength of college squash at the moment. We were just talking before we started recording. I genuinely feel that this might be the strongest ever college individual championships. Certainly the top end, you've got some world-class players. I'm pretty certain on both sides you've never had players that are ranked. In Yusuf's case, I think he's 17, 18 in the world. And then you've also got Victor at 21 in the world. On the women's side, you've got Siva at 24, 25 in the world, I think. So yeah, I think there's a legitimate case that this might be the strongest ever individual championships. From a Penn perspective, I know a few of the guys are pretty excited to get back out there, and we obviously have Andrew and Ali in the A draws, but then I think quite a few guys are pretty excited about trying to claim some B draw titles as well. So should be fun.
Yeah, how do you feel about the dynamic, especially with the top tier ones? About, you're playing against your teammates as well, where you throughout the entire season you're working for the same goal, and now you have a conflict of interest. How do you feel about that dynamic?
Yeah, it doesn't happen too often. At the moment, we've got 9 guys entered on the men's side and 5 on the women's side, with 1 more on the women's side on the wait list, so it might end up being 6. But I remember 2 years ago, James Flynn actually had an upset over Victor and then had to play Ali Abu in the quarterfinals. But I think that's the only time I've experienced two players in the same team, certainly that I'm coaching, having to play each other at individuals. So it doesn't happen that often. It certainly could happen on the men's side, just with 7 guys split across the various B draws, then there's definitely a possibility of it happening. But I think CSA tried to avoid it, certainly in the first round, and I think in the A draws they even try and avoid it in the first 2 rounds.
Oh wow, didn't know that.
Unless there's a major upset, like I say, James Flynn played Ali, but I don't think anyone was predicting that James would beat Victor in the first round and be playing Ali in the second round.
Yeah, I remember watching that. That was such a shocker to everyone, but I mean, he played phenomenally well. Well, just going back to what you were saying earlier about the level probably not going to be as high as this ever. Do you think there's a particular reason why CSA hasn't been able to recruit the likes of the top, of Siva, Yusuf, Victor, Andrew, in recent years?
I'm not sure. I think just academically, those players that were sort of playing at the very highest level, sort of making finals and semi-finals of World Juniors and British Junior Open, they just happen to be strong academically as well. And then in more recent years, I'm not sure that's been the case. Certainly, if you look at, probably the top juniors in the world over the last 3 or 4 years have been guys like Mustafa Asal, Mustafa Al-Serti, Sam Todd is probably right up there. Yahya El-Nassani. So I know that Gilly has probably reached out to all of them, and for various reasons, it's just not. Either they weren't interested because they didn't have that goal of coming to the US. They wanted to turn pro and see how good they could be straight away there, or just academically it wasn't really an option for them. Especially in the Ivy League, where there might be a misconception that Ivy League academic standards aren't that high, but trust me, when we're trying to recruit, they definitely are.
Now, I have a question for you: do you think the level of juniors is higher right now in comparison to those guys, or no?
I actually don't. And I don't know if this is related to the pandemic and the fact that essentially juniors have missed almost 2 years of top level competition. There's been no World Juniors since 2019. There's been no British Junior Open for the last 2 years. I think the only really major international junior tournament in the last 2 years is probably the US Junior Open, just this past December. And I know in some countries they've missed a little bit of training with facilities closed down. In the UK, I think that was a bit of an issue for a while. And you can really see that losing a year at that age, I'm sure you can make it up long term, but to lose sort of essentially 6 months or a year of training at 15, 16, 17 years old is, if you've only been playing the sport for 6 or 7 years, losing 1 year is essentially like 15, 20% of your entire junior career gone. So I don't personally feel like the current level of junior squash is quite what it was 2 or 3 years ago before the pandemic. I'm pretty confident that it'll bounce back and reach the same levels again sooner rather than later. But yeah, we're obviously looking at recruiting quite heavily at the moment, and we've got a big challenge this year because we're losing our top 3 players with Andrew, Ali, and James Flynn all graduating, and trying to find 3 kids to replace them is virtually impossible. Now, finding 3 kids to replace them in a normal year might have been impossible anyway, but I think the fact that junior squash is basically shut down at high, certainly at an international level. I know the US has done a great job of running their GCT circuit, and they had the junior nationals last year. They've got another junior nationals coming up, but I've noticed a difference internationally that certain countries haven't been able to produce the same quality of players as they have in recent years.
That's. I mean, the good news is I think all the teams are losing so many of their top players, especially the top end. So I guess Penn's not on the only boat in there, but
I have a feeling we might look back in 5 or 10 years and think that the 21-22 season of men's college squash might be the pinnacle. It'll be interesting just because of the number of high level players that all came. You had Victor and Marwan Tariq both played a World Juniors final together, played 1 and 2. Played 1 and 2 at Harvard. I know Marwan's still got another year because he took that extra year of took a gap in the middle. But you've got Yusuf Ibrahim, you've got Andrew and Ali graduating. So essentially, if you look at the seedings for this weekend, 5 of the top 6 seeds are all graduating this year. So tough to bounce back.
Have you or Gilly spoke to Ali about another year at Penn for Gretz? Is that?
That's actually not an option for. So the sort of loophole.
He's already played for it.
Right? No, he's only played 3 years, but the exemption that Andrew took advantage of to play as a grad student was only available to seniors who missed their senior year.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Now, Ali could have extended his undergrad studies over 5 years and graduated a year later, but he can't complete his undergrad studies and then do a master's program like Andrew and Yash have both done, because that was only available for seniors.
Right. But yeah, going back to the tournament, I personally think, especially this year, I think, first of all, CSA should market this tournament better and hype it up, because it's just unbelievable caliber. And as you said, I don't think it's ever going to reach at this level for a very long time, or if not ever. And it's also in such unique circumstances because, I personally think you never know what you're going to get out of the players in this tournament. Some players might be peaking. Some players might have no interest in playing this tournament. And you also got some under the radar players like James Flynn knocking out Victor. And to think that Yusuf has never won this tournament. For those various reasons, I think this is a tournament that everyone should be looking forward to. But yeah, unfortunately, we do not have the draw in our hands because it comes out incredibly late, as we all know.
I mean, I do have access to the provisional seedings, but you're right. I mean, it's always an interesting event because I think so many players peak for the team championships, and it's such a draining season with these 3 back-to-back weekends. I know that the men have had a weekend off, but picking yourself up, I mean, I'll be honest, I have no idea how our guys are going to perform. I think some of them are really excited to try and bounce back and try and forget about the final defeat to Harvard and just get back on court and compete hard. I think other guys will be just still in a bit of a slump because that was such a heartbreaking loss for them. And I think it's the same in other teams. Like you just mentioned, like Yusuf is currently top 20 in the world. He's beaten Shibagi 3 times in the last 2 years, and yet he's never won the college individual nationals, which is crazy.
Yeah.
I don't think he's even made the semis. I think he's lost quarterfinals on both occasions that he's played it.
Yeah. No, you're right. But yeah, so big shout out to Stuart for sharing the initial round of seeding. So the one we have right now is the second round. Hopefully this stays the same. I don't see anything vast changes happening in the next 2 days. But I'm just going to go ahead and list down the top 8 for people listening in on this so they have an idea. And then we'll talk about who Stuart thinks are the contenders, and we'll start with the women's division. So we got at 1 seed, we got Siva from Cornell, number 2 seed Hana from Harvard, and 3 seed Malak Kamal from Trinity, 4th seed Marina Stefanoni from Harvard, 5th seed Karina from Drexel, 6th seed Megan Best from UVA, 7th seed Wen Li from Cornell, and 8th seed Alina Bushma from Drexel. Probably butchered half of those names, but let's get into it. So who do you think are the contenders for the women's draw?
I mean, I think you have to go with Siva, the number 1 seed, as the favourite. She's 23 in the world. She just had a really good run to the semi-finals, I believe, was it Cleveland, taking out some pretty good players along the way. She actually lost in the semis to Olivia Victor in a pretty tight match. So she's, to me, the standout. It would have been interesting. Farida Mohammed would have been up in the same sort of
also
ranking bracket.
Chonson Yuk from also Columbia. Both don't seem to be participating in this tournament. Do you have the inside scoop of why they're not playing?
I have some information. We actually played Columbia in the women's team championships last weekend, and Farida played the day before. Farida and her sister Habiba, who play 1 and 3, played in the first round match against Yale. They won their matches, but the team lost 5-4. And we played them the next day in the 5 to 8 bracket consoles. I believe there was some sort of incident. I've heard rumours, but I don't want to say without being able to confirm it. But essentially, they were dropped from the team for their match against us. Chanson Yuk, who was their number 2, did play, so she played at 1. but Farida and Habiba did not, for reasons that I'll keep quiet on. And I suspect that her not playing the individuals is related to that as well, because Habiba is also not playing the individuals. I think Chanson Yuk is playing a PSA this weekend. I don't know if that was always the plan or if that was consequential last weekend as well. I'm not sure.
But it's tough because I initially thought those two would also be in the mix for the top and could challenge Siva in the top. But I do want to mention...
I'm looking at the world rankings right now, and it would have been great because Siva's ranked 23 in the world and Farida's ranked 22 in the world. So that would have been interesting. I know they played earlier in the season and Siva actually won that match. So she would have possibly still been the number one seed just based on her head-to-head win in a college match.
But yeah, we'd be remiss also not to talk about the second seed, Hana Muataz. I think she's a phenomenal player who doesn't seem to be as active as the others on the PSA tour, but I mean, her results speak for itself. So what are your thoughts on her?
Yeah, she's had a great season. I think she's only lost to those two, if I'm right.
I think she's only lost once to Siva in 5. Yeah.
And
from what I checked,
I'm not sure who she played in the, she actually beat Farida 3-love. So she's had a great season. As you say, she's ranked a little bit lower in the world rankings. I think she's maybe around 50. I'm just verifying that now. If I can find her. Oh, she's 57 in the world. So, I mean, any player that plays number one on the national championship winning team is going to be pretty strong. So she's legitimately, in my mind, the second seed and probably most likely to make the final and challenge Siva in the final. She actually beat Siva in the semi-finals 2 years ago when it was held at Penn. I remember that match, and then she went on and she lost to Georgina Kennedy in the final. So could be an interesting battle.
If you were to predict, would you still have Siva come out on top for winning this? Between the two of them?
Yeah. I mean, she's, like I say, she's unbeaten. She's done well on the PSA. I love watching Siva play. She plays really fun-looking squash. She moves the ball around the court really nicely. She always plays with a smile on her face and seems like she's enjoying the game. I remember the first time I saw her play actually was when she was about 15 years old. And she was actually playing, it was the Commonwealth Youth Games, and it was an under-18 event, which was a bit odd, but she won the tournament and just was a class above everyone else in the draw, even though she was 2 or 3 years younger than them.
What do you think are the biggest strengths for her on court?
She's just so effortless in her movement. She's got really good ball control. She takes the ball in short well, but she also hits good length. She does the basics well. She's someone that I would be very surprised if she doesn't go on and make the top 10 in the world. I mean, if you're still playing college squash and you're already 23 in the world, then that's probably not a particularly bold prediction. But yeah, she's, I mean, I would never ever say that anyone is going to be the next Nicole David, but obviously the similarities with her coming from Malaysia and probably being the most likely. I mean, Malaysia produces some exceptional juniors these days, but I think in the last sort of 5-10 years, she's been the standout, and I think it's showing in her PSA results as well at the moment. Yeah.
Is there anyone outside the top 8 draw that you, when you were looking at it, being like, oh, I'm not sure, I feel like a player should be higher?
No, I mean, a couple of people that I always like watching them play. Karina Taima at Drexel is a really nice player. She's seeded 5, so it's not a bold prediction that she could make semis and maybe even challenge someone. I saw her play. Drexel actually had an amazing weekend at the team championships, making the final. Karina actually lost her match in the semi. They played Trinity. They were 4-3 up, and Karina was, I think, 2-1 up. Or no, 2. Yeah, she's 2-1 up or 2-1 down. Anyway, she lost an epic fourth game, she won an epic fourth game, and then lost in the fifth, which made it 4-all. But then they won the fifth match from 2-love down, which was an amazing story. Not least because the girl that won it is actually a Ukrainian girl, Alina Bushma, who's also a top 8 seed this weekend. She's seeded 8th. And just with everything else going on in the world, I thought that was a great story that a girl from Ukraine had won a match like that to get Drexel into the final against Trinity. They beat, I think they went in as the 6th seeds last weekend.
Ended up second. That is an amazing story.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
And I wish CSA had done a little bit more to promote that. I actually spoke to David Pillman briefly about that, and I think he's planning to do something to promote that story. Because I think it's, as far as I'm aware, there's only 2 Ukrainian girls playing college squash, and one of them plays for Drexel and the other one plays for Trinity. And they happen to play each other in the semi-finals. So that was great.
Yeah, that is a great story. Do you think? What are your thoughts on the 3rd and 4th seed of the Trinity, Malak Kamal and Marina Stefanoni?
Yeah, I've only seen Malak play a couple of times. I saw her play when we played Trinity this season, and she beat our number 1 fairly convincingly, looked like a solid player. And then the second time I saw her play was against Karina, which she won that match in 5. So I think she's deservedly one of the 3-4 seeds. I don't get the sense that she's at the same level as the top 2. I would be very surprised if she challenged either of them and caused an upset there. I think for her, just trying to make the semis is probably more realistic. Marina is always an interesting one, because Marina I've seen play a lot over the years. She used to come and play the Scottish Junior Open when I was coaching there, when she was like 12 or 13 years old, and would clean up there and clean up virtually everywhere, to be honest. She won British Junior Open. She's doing reasonably well in the PSA. I know she played the US Open, like professional tournament, earlier this season, and had a big upset against Danielle Letourneau, who's top 20 in the world. So she could definitely cause an upset. She's got the game that she moves really well. She's very steady, solid, good athlete, and hard to break down. So depending, I'm assuming if she's seeded 4 that she'll play Siva in the semis. But that could be a tight match, I think. So.
Well, I agree with you. I think the top 2 seats are a little level above everyone else, especially in the women's side of things. Going back to Marina, what do you think she needs to do to get to the level of the top 2 seeds?
Good question. I think she maybe isn't as clinical or as creative as someone like a Siva. Siva's just so smooth in the way that she hits to all 4 corners. Marina's game's more sort of length-based from when I've seen her play, especially against good players. I mean, she plays pretty open when she's winning comfortably, and she can move the ball around there. But anytime I've seen her in a tighter match where she's really having to play at her best, she tends to sort of just try and get in front and hit deep a bit more than other girls at that level. So yeah, I think trying to develop her short game a little bit. She moves really well, so trying to use her speed to get on the ball early and create a bit of pressure, but just volleying more and taking the ball in short and moving her opponent around the court, and then hunting that next ball, I think, is an area that she could still get a little bit better at.
I feel that the one name that I do want to mention that is outside the top 8 seed that could really cause trouble is Amina Yusri from Harvard. I think she plays 3. I'm not sure if you've seen her play, but I personally think she should be seated way above a lot of these players. It's just that the fact that she plays 3, there's not enough exposure.
It's funny you say that. So I've not seen her play. I've seen her play once this season, again when we played them, and I was impressed. But last weekend, I was coaching the number. We played Harvard in the first round of the team championships, and I coached our number 4 against their number 4, and I was very impressed with their number 4. So I think everyone knows that Hannah and Marina are top players. Their number 4, who's actually not in the A draw, she's one of the 1 seeds in the B draw at the moment. but she really impressed me. She's a freshman. I hadn't really seen her much or heard much about her from juniors, but I watched her play and thought she's really good. I mean, I'm guessing she's 18, maybe 19 years old, but she really impressed me. And again, if Amina Yusri is a level above that, then yeah, you're right. She could definitely cause an upset, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if she took out one of the top 8 seeds in the first round.
Yeah, no, I can fully see that happening as well. Is there any other names that you think should be mentioned, or anyone even in the top 8 that you think could cause some real trouble to the top 4?
Probably the one name that stands out to me is Andrea Lee, who plays at Colby College. Now, I'm sure you and people that are listening know that Colby are not one of the top programs. They haven't played many of the big schools, but they have this girl from Malaysia who had a pretty successful junior career, hasn't really played any of the top individual players this year. And from my memory of her as a junior, she was one of the sort of top 4 to 8 players in her age in the world. So it wouldn't surprise me. I've not seen her much. The only problem is that at the moment on the provisional seeding, she's seeded 16, which means she'll play Siva in the first round. Which could be a bit of a tough draw. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see how she would get on if she got a slightly different draw. And she might also, even go on.
Tough. I think it's tough for her because she doesn't really get to have top match play throughout the entire season. She's probably running away with it with the players she's playing.
Even day to day in her training, she's probably significantly better than the other girls in her team. So, yeah.
So, okay. So final prediction for Stuart for the women's draw is Siva winning it. Yeah.
I'm sort of known for playing the percentages well, and sometimes reflected in my coaching, but also my predictions. So if in doubt, just go for the number 1 seed. They're usually number 1 seeds for the reason, for good reason. So yeah, I think it would take a big upset. I think the most likely player is definitely Hannah.
I personally think Hannah could win this. I think she's going to win it. Because previous results of her beating her in individuals, maybe the high 10 could be a factor. I don't know how much you think of that as a factor, the high 10, low 10 situation, but
I think that's interesting. I don't think it's as big a factor as people think. I've heard debates about whether college squash should switch. I'm not convinced, to be honest, for a number of reasons. One is that I don't think it's necessary for 90% of college squash. I do think that it would benefit some of the schools in the top 8 and certainly some of the players at the top end of those schools. I mean, I could definitely see the argument for the A draw of individuals being played on a 17-inch tin, because these are basically PSA level players that are playing. My issue is that most teams are not PSA level players, and even the strong teams. I mean, once you go down to like 6, 7, 8, 9, I'm not sure those players need to be playing on 17-inch tins.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And then it becomes really tricky to like where do you draw the line? Do you say, okay, we'll play the A division of team nationals on a 17-inch tin, but BCD is on a 19-inch tin, and then if we have a match scheduled with a team that's ranked like 12 in the country and we want to play on a 17-inch tin to prepare for nationals, and they want to play on a 19-inch tin, then you get into all sorts of problems. So I overall, on balance, I actually think 19-inch tins are fine. Yeah, the one exception I think would maybe be for the A draw of individuals. But then if they've been playing on a 19-inch tin all season, does it really make sense to switch it for the last tournament of the season?
Yeah, that's a fair point. But yeah, let's switching gears to the men's draw. Again, I'm just going to go down the list of the top 8 players. Beginning with the first seed right now is Yusuf Ibrahim from Princeton, 2 seed Victor from Harvard, 3 seed Andrew from UPenn, 4th seed Ali Hussein from UVA, 5th seed Ali Abu El Ainin from UPenn, 6th seed Marwan Tariq from Harvard, number 7th seed Miko from Trinity, and 8th seed Velvan from Columbia. Now, Stuart, what are your thoughts on the men's division?
My first thought is just what we said earlier, which is, geez, that's a strong tournament. Yeah. I mean, in my mind, there are 6 potential winners there. I would say the top 6 seeds are all capable of winning it. I do feel, I know Miko had a really good match with Ali Hussein at Team Nationals, and actually, I think he won that match. Is that right?
Yes, he did in the 5th game.
But to me, in terms of who I think is capable of winning the tournament overall, I think that the top 6 seeds is probably where the winner's going to come from.
So you think the top 6 seeds were correctly seeded as well?
Yeah, I can actually see an argument for Marwan Tariq being a little bit higher. Just going back to, I actually think the way he played, I don't know if you saw the match, but his match with Ali Abu in the final of the team event 2 weeks ago was one of the best performances. In fact, probably the best performance I've ever seen in a college squash match in my life.
What makes you say that?
I just thought he was absolutely flawless. I think from memory, he didn't make a single error the entire match. He strikes me as one of these guys that's maybe not as consistent as Victor, and I can totally see why Victor plays one. Victor is so tough to break down, and it totally makes sense to me that Victor wins their challenge matches, but I just think when Marwan really gets up for a match and is really locked in, he's as good as anyone. I saw it in that performance. I mean, Ali probably didn't play his best squash, but actually even when he did play his best squash, he still wasn't winning some of those rallies, and that's against someone as good as Ali. That's not often you say that. So yeah, I think Marwan, if he's in that sort of form, and he's as motivated as he was 2 weeks ago, then he's going to be very tough to beat. He's also the reigning champion. He won the event 2 years ago against Ali at Penn. So I remember that match pretty well, as I'm sure Ali does.
Yeah.
I mean, the biggest thing I'm interested in is how Yusuf bounces back from his little run, big run actually, I should say, in Chicago.
It's going to be a quick turnaround for him. Actually, he's making it to the finals. I just checked.
He just beat Marwan?
He just bageled Marwan in the 5th game.
Wow.
So that's going to be a tough turnaround for Yusuf. Also going from low 10 to high 10 out of nowhere, and not even getting a break, not really getting any break. He's probably have to travel.
Yeah. Well, he's essentially going to get 1 day off on Thursday to travel back. So he's going to play the final tomorrow, which is Wednesday. He's going to come back on Thursday, and then he's going to play, I believe, 2 matches in the first round and the quarterfinals on Friday. I do think that on balance, he is the best player in college squash. I think, even though him and Victor are pretty close in rankings, and they had a really tight match, I believe. I think Yusuf won 11-7 in the 5th earlier this year. I think if you just look at how much of a threat he is to the top players in the world, I mean, he's beaten Shibagi 3 times. He's making the final of the Windy City Open, which is one of the biggest tournaments in the calendar. So I don't think you can make a case that Victor is that much of a threat to the top 8 or top 10 players in the world yet. But again, with Yusuf, you sort of question whether college squash is as important to him as it is to some of the other guys. Most of his best results have come in PSA events. And I don't think he's played the individual event twice in his freshman and sophomore years, and he lost in the quarterfinals both times. Now, he obviously wasn't playing at the level he's at now, but it's pretty wild to think that he might graduate. If he doesn't win this weekend, he might graduate, go on to be world number 1 potentially in the future, because he has that level of ability, and yet he never won college individuals. Yeah,
that is kind of wild to think about. But yeah, I agree. It's interesting you do see some cracks in the armor for him, especially in college squash. It's not like he goes unbeaten the entire season for any of his seasons. What do you think the reason is? Do you think it's just him not being as motivated as he is on the PSA tour?
Yeah, I do think his freshman and sophomore years, he wasn't as good as he is now, obviously. I think he's someone that benefited hugely from the COVID break, and I know he went back to Egypt and he was training full-time there while sort of doing his junior year online back there. And I suspect he was basically training. I've heard rumours that he struggles a little bit with the balance of academics and training when he's at Princeton, which is pretty understandable. But I think he found that balance a little bit easier to manage when classes were online and everything was being done remote. And you really saw the difference that it made to his game. I mean, he was a very, very good player, and now he's a world-class player after that. So I'm not sure how much he cares about college squash, which is I mean, when you're having that much success in the PSA Tour, but it's always sort of, you've always felt with him that you always had a chance, even if he was a little bit better than you, just because on any given day he may not be 100% motivated for that match, or and I don't know what to put that down to, but that's just always the sort of perception that I've had, is that he's a big time player, but I'm not sure college squash qualifies as big time for him.
Yeah, no, I agree. Should we move on to the second seed, who also has a big chance of winning this, Victor? What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I mean, I think if Yusuf is off, then Victor's the most obvious candidate to win. I think he's so steady. He's hard to break down. He's very, very good. Apart from that one defeat a couple of years ago to James in the individuals, he rarely loses any matches that he should win. Sort of the opposite of Yusuf, where he can be a bit more up and down. I think there's no question that his potential is a little bit lower than Yusuf's. Certainly, to me, he doesn't quite pose the same threat to the top 5, top 10 guys that Yusuf does, but his upside is that he doesn't really have too many bad days, and when he even on his bad days, he still is so hard to break down and beat, because he plays less risky squash. He moves the ball around, but slightly safer. He seems very good mentally. He's always focused, and doesn't really give you too many cheap points. So yeah, he would be the sort of obvious candidate to take advantage, and he's already won an individual championship as a freshman, so he could definitely pick up a second title this weekend.
Stuart, what do you think? Just kind of a side note, what do you think Victor has to do in his game? Do you see a glaring weakness or anything that isn't seeing him as much success as Yusuf is on the tour right now?
I think there's two things. One is that he's, and this, I hope it doesn't come across as a criticism because he's a phenomenal player, but he's a little bit one-dimensional. He plays at a very steady pace, but he struggles if the pace is just a little bit faster than he's comfortable at. And you don't see that in college squash too often, but I remember watching him play Joel Macon. I think it was Joel or either Paul Call, but someone that could sort of match his physicality and just make him do a lot of work. And he really didn't have any tools to hurt him. And I think for him to be a real threat, he has to be a little bit more clinical, which, like we said, might mean making a few more errors here and there, but also picking up a few points. Because it always feels like his short game is kind of working you, as opposed to trying to put the ball in the net and win the point outright. He's kind of trying to move you around, which, again, for those very top guys, might not be enough. And I think he also has to be able to play a little bit quicker against those guys. Like I say, he plays in a really nice rhythm, and it's hard to get him out of that rhythm. Anytime I coach against him, I'm always sort of emphasising the importance of you have to break up his rhythm and you have to mix the pace up and play faster, play slower. But if you play at that sort of medium 3/4 pace, then he's so accurate that it's very hard to beat him at that game.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of, let's move on to the third seed, one of your players who I thought gave an incredible performance during that finals and breaking up that rhythm, Andrew Douglas. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I think Andrew's had a great year overall for someone that I'm not sure how many people know this, but he struggled for about 6 weeks with a bit of an injury. He won a PSA event in December, just before Christmas, and then he was training back at home between Christmas and New Year's, and picked up a bit of a strain in his sort of his lower back and abductor, and he really struggled to move as efficiently. And anyone that knows Andrew's game knows that movement is one of the things that he relies on and does so well. So if you were following our matches closely, he was generally only playing one match each weekend. So
I thought that was a strategic, just pulling out your top player, resting him up.
I wish I could say that was the case, but no, it was just, he was kind of operating at like 80 to 90%. So it wasn't like he couldn't play, but it would take him a couple of days to recover fully. And most of the weekends we felt we could get by without him. So we picked the match that we thought was more necessary to play him in that, and then rest him in the other match. But I think, given that how little training he had that semester, I mean, literally since January 1st, I think he completed maybe 3 or 4 training sessions with the team from start to finish. Now, he was training quite a lot. He was training most days, but he'd sort of do like 60% of the sessions, and then if we do some sort of open match play type stuff at the end, he'd stop and not do that. But he was still on court most days and still hitting balls and moving a little bit, but he rarely did anything full court. So how he was able to perform the way he did against Victor in the final, I have no idea. But I think it speaks to his natural fitness and athleticism, that he could miss so much hard training and still be able to compete for 5 games with Victor and compete so well. And also just how tough he is mentally, that he can put things like that at the back of his mind and just get on with it. So I was really impressed with the way he played it at Nationals in all 3 matches, actually.
What do you think is special about his game, and something that you think he should be working on as he progresses on, as he's taking on the professional tour after graduation?
I mean, physically he's very, very good. He's got a natural engine. Aerobically, he's very good. He's someone that's worked very, very extensively on his movement. I think some people view his movement as a little bit quirky and a little bit different to how some people move, but I think that's one of his strengths. He's worked a lot on using all 4 corners a lot more. I've sort of encouraged him to open up and use his racket ability, because I don't think he viewed himself as particularly skillful or as someone that could play short well. And I disagree. I think his racket work is excellent. And you can kind of see that a little bit more now. If you've watched him play in the last year, he's using the front of the court a lot more. He's more comfortable cross-courting the ball and switching on to the forehand side, which he didn't used to like to do. He was very backhand dominant. He always felt really comfortable on that side of the court and kind of wanted to keep the ball there as much as possible. And now he's a lot more comfortable switching the ball and moving it around. In terms of where he can still make a little bit of improvement, I think although he uses the front of the court a lot better now, I still think he can be a little bit more clinical in the front, and being able to put the ball away, especially from the mid and back court. He's got a really good counter drop, works the ball in. If you take him in short, he gets up there and drags you forward as well, pretty well, I think. But especially on his volley drops, I think he can be a little bit more severe. It's funny, his backhand volley drop actually is pretty good, and when you sort of feed him and do sessions with him, it's exceptionally good. He just needs to be reminded of how good it is, because sometimes he defaults to being a bit more defensive when he probably doesn't need to be. His forehand volley drop is certainly an area that we're still continuing to work on and trying to get a little bit more cut on the ball. When he takes it in, he can sometimes be a little bit flat with his racket face on that side of the court. But yeah, everything I've seen of Andrew suggests that I think he's going to be very successful playing PSA.
Yeah,
he had a few doubts about whether he wanted to do that. I know you've spoken to him on this podcast, and he wasn't 100% sure what he was going to do after graduation, but he's pretty committed. I've actually was talking to him yesterday about PSA tournaments and what he's going to do in the next 2 or 3 months.
So that's great news. I think he's great. addition, especially for Team USA. Such a talent. Moving on to the fourth seed, we have Ali Hussein, who's also, I guess, a challenger in the top 6. What do you think of his chances and his game in general?
Well, he's definitely a challenger because, as far as I'm aware, he's the only guy that beat Yusuf this season in college squash. So that instantly makes him a challenger.
Yeah.
I've only really seen him play a couple of times, but from speaking to Andrew and Ali about Ali Hussein, they talk about how tough he is, how physically strong he is, how many balls he gets back. Mentally, it sounds like he's really good. He played Andrew earlier this season, and Andrew, I thought, played some of the best squash that I'd ever seen him play for the first couple of games and won them fairly comfortably. But Ali just kept fighting and hung in, just made it a war and got back into it, won the third game, and then the fourth game got a little bit scrappy, if I'm honest. There was a lot of calls at that point. But he never gives up. He gets a lot of balls back, and he's willing to run and run and run. I actually heard him talking to you about some of the fitness sessions he does and how much he loves running, which sounded insane.
You're a runner yourself, right?
A little bit, yeah. It's kind of something I do to keep in shape. I don't play any sports these days, so I got into running. I ran a couple of marathons just to keep myself entertained. So yeah, I tend to run a lot. But I think that weekend where Ali Hussein played Andrew Douglas, he then played the next day against
Yusuf.
I think he played Friday against Andrew. Then he beat Yusuf on the Saturday, and then he played Veer on the Sunday. And he lost to Andrew in 4, beat Yusuf in 5, I believe, and then beat Veer in 5. Now that is a tough weekend, and he might be the only person that could have done that back to back. So yeah, he's, like I say, he's a tough competitor and very strong mentally and physically.
Now moving on to the fifth contender that you think is, again, one of your kids, Ali Abu Alainen, who's also a finalist. And I also agree. I think he could he's definitely is a contender. What are your thoughts on his chances and his game in general?
Yeah, his game, I love his game. Before I even came to Penn, I saw him play when I was coaching up at Amherst, and he was a freshman at Penn. I actually saw him play at the US Junior Open even before he got to Penn, I think, and he won the US Junior Open, beating, I think he beat Ali Hussein and Marwan Tariq to win that tournament.
Wow.
And it was just, back then he was actually quite a different player. He was much more open and probably made a few more errors than he does now. But in some ways it was more exciting to watch because he would kind of just go for it, and it was a little bit random. What I think he's done over the last 3 or 4 years to get to the level he's at now is add a bit more structure and a bit more patience.
So it's a little bit opposite of Victor and Andrew with Ali.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's got a much more solid length game now. He uses the back of the court to get in front of his opponent a little bit better. And yeah, on his day, I think he's already top 80 in the world PSA. I think he's shown this season he's had some wins over top 50 players, which I think is probably a pretty accurate representation of his level, probably somewhere around 40 or 50 in the world at the moment, just in terms of the way he's playing. And again, I've no doubt that he's fully committed to playing PSA next year, and I think he's planning to go back to Egypt and do most of his training there, but hopefully I'll get to keep working with him a little bit when he's up in the US. And his brother lives in Philly.
Has that been in talks?
Has
that been in talks about working with you?
Yeah, we've spoke about it a little bit, and I've sort of just said, look, I'm happy to help whenever you need my guidance. If you're ever, I think he will. There's so many tournaments in the US these days that he'll come and play events, and then maybe between them come to Philly, stay with his brother, and come and train with me and some of the guys in the team. So yeah, I've got a great relationship with Ali. I love working with him. He's always so open to trying new things and different ideas. So yeah, I've no doubt that he will be top 30, top 20, possibly even higher in the world in 2 or 3 years' time.
Yeah. And the final person that we did mention before, but Marwan Tariq, who is our defending champ for this tournament. Do you think he's got a real shot at winning this as well?
Well, it's crazy that the defending champ is seeded 6. I said already, I think Marwan on his day is as good as anyone. Maybe Yusuf playing at his very best is still a level above even Marwan at his very best. But I'm really interested to see what he does, because he's the only one of the top 6 seeds that's still got another year left. And from what I've heard, he's not 100% sure if he's going to play professionally once he graduates. I actually think that would be one of the biggest wastes of talent and ability that I've ever seen, because I just think he's a phenomenal player. Maybe he doesn't quite enjoy the sort of grind of working and the process of training hard every day, so maybe that's a factor. But when he wants to play well, he's just an exceptionally good player. Like I say, I've never coached anyone against, or certainly anyone of Ali's level in a match where I thought there's nothing I could have done to help him win that match on that day. That's how good Marwan Tariq was in their match 2 weeks ago. I just, I thought like admitting it, but I genuinely think they could have played that match 10 times and it might have been 9-1 or 10-0 to Marwan. He was that good.
I mean, he seems to step it up on the occasion every time with Marwan.
Yeah, and just to play one game, to play a full match against someone of Ali's level and not make a single error is pretty special. I mean, almost every point Ali won, he had to hit a perfect shot to win it. There was one rally early in the match, and Ali had him all over the court. He played a perfect point. He was dominating the ball, the rally, controlling the middle of the court, and he still lost the rally. And I thought, oh dear, this is going to be tough.
So you knew early on that this could be a tough one.
Yeah, I mean, you never know with players like that, because Ali obviously, first of all, you never know if Marwan is going to sustain that level. Either in terms of concentration or physically, whether he can keep retrieving like that. And you also know that Ali is always capable of producing some great squash, so it was never that clear cut. But I certainly remember thinking early on in the match, this is going to be a really tough match. So, and that's how it played out, unfortunately.
But yeah, so we have covered the top 6 that Stuart thinks are the actual contenders for winning this tournament. But real quick, are there any names that stand out to you that you think you want to talk about or mention?
No, I do think the winner is going to come from those 6. Now, the 7 seed is Mikko Arjunen from Trinity, who's a solid player, can definitely upset any of those top 6 on his day. I think he just beat Ali Hussein at the team championships in a 5-gamer. I think it was like an hour and 50 minutes. It's pretty absurd. So he's deservedly the number 7 seed, but I would be shocked if he actually won the tournament overall, but I probably wouldn't be shocked if he had an upset along the way. Unfortunately for him, I think if the seedings remain the same, he would play Victor in the quarterfinals, and I don't see him having the tools required to beat Victor, if I'm honest. And then you've got Velavan, who a couple of years ago was really dangerous. Doesn't seem like he's as fit this year. Doesn't seem like he's quite as motivated as he was when he first started at Columbia. He won the British Junior Open a few years back, so he's obviously a world-class player, but I don't think he's in that sort of form. And I'm not sure if he's planning to play PSA after he graduates, but at the moment I don't think he's quite at the same level as the top 6 either. Further down, the guy that stands out to me that I rate extremely highly is Sam Sherrill.
I was going to mention him as well.
I kind of like what you said about Amina Yusri. Like, he plays at 3 for Harvard, so he wins most of his matches pretty comfortably, but he's just so dominant. Like, there's a number of matches where you're like, oh, that could be a tough match, and he doesn't drop games very often. He
doesn't give him too many points either.
Yeah, exactly. Like, he plays good players and he just deals with them. I mean, James Flynn is like his
top class.
Sam is James's kryptonite. Like, I don't know what their head-to-head record is, but it's not particularly favourable for James. Let's just say that. James has never beaten him, and it always feels like a winnable match. Maybe not so much this season because James has been struggling with a bit. pulled his hamstring earlier in the year, so he's not been 100% fit. But even completely fit, Sam just seems to deal with him so well, and just about everywhere else, he just like you say, he doesn't give up many cheap points. He's always focused, and he's such a hard guy to break down. Like he doesn't give you anything really. So he's an interesting one. I think according to seedings currently, he would play Ali Hussein in the first match, which would be a really interesting match.
That is interesting because
I remember a few years ago with individuals. I think it might have been Sam's freshman or sophomore year.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I think he took out Ashley. He almost took out Ashley Davies, a couple of years back.
Yeah.
Show was playing.
He lost in 5. He was 2-0 up against Ashley. I watched the whole match, and Ashley was the number 1 seed in the individuals. Hadn't lost the college match all year, and Sam went 2-0 up on him, and ended up losing in 5. But
still just shows Sam's how dangerous he could be. Player. But yeah, I was going to mention. I did speak with Ali Hussein earlier this week, and I think he did mention the one player he did not want to play first round was Sam Sherrill, but I guess with these seedings, that will be his first
definitely
match.
Amongst the guys seeded 9 to 16, he'd be the one I would want to avoid the most, I think.
Yeah.
The other interesting one is similar to the girl from Colby that I mentioned, but Lewis Anderson, who's at St. Lawrence University, seeded 9th. Because he's another guy that's at a school that don't really play the top teams anymore. St. Lawrence was a very, very good program a few years back, but they're not up near the top 8 these days. So they tend to play some of the like NESCAC schools and very few of the top 8. So Lewis Anderson, I believe, has not lost this year, but probably his best win was against Beer from Cornell. So he's not really played any of the top 8 guys individually.
Do you think he could potentially do well in this tournament or not really?
I would be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if he beat Velavon, just because, like I say, it's an 8v9 match, and that's probably about right in terms of seedings. He was a semi-finalist, I think, of the World Juniors a few years back, so he's a very good player, but I think he's played some smaller PSA events and he's not really shown that sort of form, so I don't think he's likely to challenge the top 5 or 6 players individually.
Yeah. Got it. So to wrap it up, who would you pick as the final winner for winning this tournament, the men's side of things?
I actually think it might be Victor. I'm going to be really interested to see how Yusuf comes back from Chicago, and how motivated. I mean, first of all, how physically his body feels, and then how mentally he's up for it. And maybe he comes back thinking, "This is my last chance to win individuals. I've never won it. I want to prove that I'm the best player in college squash." But I have a feeling Victor is out to prove something as well. I obviously will be hoping that it's Andrew or Ali. But I think Yusuf and Victor, they're both 17 and 21 in the world, so they're going to be the guys to beat.
Yeah. So there you have it, guys. Stuart's predictions for the individuals. But before we wrap it up, I kind of wanted to do the quick fire segment with Stuart and see what his answers are and kind of get to know him better. But to start off, for some squash-related ones, to see what kind of player Stuart is. So if you're 10-love down in the 5th game, are you the player to go for it or play it out?
10-love down?
Yeah, in the 5th game.
Definitely going for it. I do have a funny story about once losing a 4th game 11-love and then winning the 5th.
Oh, wow. I don't know how you bounce back from that.
Well, it was one of those games where it got to 6. It was actually against a former college squash player. It was against Taboki Maholo, who's played at Trinity.
Oh, yeah.
And I was 2-1 up. I went 6 or 7 love down in the 4th and thought, not wasting any more energy on this game. Tossed it, lost it 11 love, and then won the 5th. So, but yeah, if I'm 11 love down in the 5th, I'm definitely fighting for that last point.
What are your thoughts on best of 3?
I think best of 3 is great in 1 or 2 tournaments a year. I think it detracts from one of my favourite bits about squash, which is the physicality.
Yeah.
I also don't think it's similar to what we talked about with the 17-inch tin with college squash. I don't think best of 3 is necessary outside the top maybe 20, 30 players in the world. I just don't think the matches are short enough or need it. I mean, I think you've seen that a little bit on the women's side occasionally. I think back to the NetSuite Open in San Francisco where Amanda Sobey won a match in like 9 minutes. Now, you could say, well, if it was best of 5, she'd probably still have won that match in 15 minutes, so what difference does it make? But one of my favourite things about squash is the physical nature of it and the fact that you can't be successful unless you're physically very, very fit, fast, and capable of surviving like 60-minute matches from time to time.
So what are your thoughts on doubles?
Hardball or softball?
So hardball?
I don't really have strong opinions. I mean,
how about softball then?
Softball is actually quite fun. I played the Commonwealth Games a few years back, and they've actually lowered the tin to 13 inches, which if you've ever seen a 13-inch tin, it blows your mind. You're like, wait, that can't be right. like you think that it's 7 inches the first time you see it.
Yeah.
And it's actually really fun. Like the court's extra wide. There's plenty of space. You can play really attacking squash. So softball doubles at a high level is actually a really good game, I think. Hardball doubles, I don't know enough to comment. I've played it a few times, and yeah, it was pretty fun. I wasn't very good at it, so maybe if it was better, I would enjoy it even more. But I have no issue with it. I like the fact that college squash is having
I saw that
doubles events alongside the singles this weekend. I think that's a fun little addition. So we've got a bunch of players that have signed up for it. But yeah, I think it's
so. Who would you pick as your ideal partner for doubles?
We were talking about this amongst our team. The general consensus was that James Flynn is probably going to be the best player on the Penn team anyway at hardball doubles.
Why James Flynn?
He's got really good hands. He's got a really good sense of how to use the court effectively and different angles and those sort of. He's quite creative. Those sort of things translate pretty well to doubles. And he's also, I think he played a little bit of hardball doubles growing up. So if I was one of the other guys in the team trying to grab a partner, he would have been my first request.
What are your thoughts on commentators for squash, and is that of something of interest for you?
I mean, I think they're good. Even better. I think some of them are great. There's one or two that I don't particularly like, but I think Joey's great. I think Johnny Williams, who does 1 or 2 tournaments a year, is probably my favourite. I think he brings a really interesting perspective to the game.
Yeah.
Some of the female voices, I love Aisling Blake and Vanessa Atkinson when they do events. But yeah, overall, I think PSA have done a great job with squash TV and commentary and production and social media. So overall, I think they do a really good job.
Yeah,
on that front. In terms of me doing commentary, then probably not. I think I would probably enjoy it, but I've always joked that I probably don't have the most exciting voice in the world. So I'm not sure. Not sure I would want to listen to me commentating in a match, let alone anyone else. So
it's a harsh critique on yourself. But let's move on to the question that we did preface before. But who do you think is the most underrated player on tour and most underrated college player as of now?
Underrated. I'm actually going to pick someone that you might say, well, he's definitely not underrated, but I think Paul Call. I know he's just gone to number 1 in the world today, and so it's hard to say that. It's hard to say the number 1 player in the world is underrated, but I'm just such a huge fan of what he's achieved and the amount of work that he's put in to get there. I don't think he gets quite the credit he deserves for the skill in his game. I watched him play Joe Macon last night.
Oh my God.
And his ball control is just phenomenal. Like, you can talk about his movement and his physicality and all that, but you cannot beat Joe Macon that convincingly without hitting good, accurate shots over and over and over again. And again, I think I love watching him play. I think he's someone that if you're not a huge fan of squash, you maybe don't appreciate the skill involved in what he's doing. But yeah, I don't think he gets the credit he deserves for everything that he's done. All the Egyptian guys are obviously exciting to watch and tend to be a bit more creative, and I understand why people love watching them play. But he'd be one that I would consider to be underrated, which, like I say, is a bit ironic given that he's number one in the world.
Just today that he's just turned number one. Wait, Stuart, I have a follow-up question to that. Do you think he's there to stay at the top spot?
I actually do, just because I think mentally he's prepared for it. I'm sure Farag and Shorbagy are going to be out. I mean, Shorbagy's been pretty open about the fact that he wants to get back to number one. I've no doubt Farag does. And I think certainly Farag, I think, will at some point. Shorbagy is going to be interesting to see how he recovers. But I also think Paul is so strong mentally. He's not playing high risk squash where it's like, oh, well, he was on a good run for 6 months, but he's going to start like making errors and hitting the 10 and being easy to beat next month. Like he's just always going to be consistent and hard to break down. So for that reason alone, I think he's going to be tough to knock off that number one spot.
Yeah. Most underrated college player?
Probably Sam, who I already mentioned.
Yeah.
Again, you play number 3 in the Harvard team, then maybe you don't get the attention that Victor and Marwan get, but I rate him really highly. My understanding is that he's not planning to play PSA, which I actually think is a bit of a waste because I think he's a guy that could do pretty well. I'm not saying he could be top 10 or top 20 in the world, but I definitely think he could be a solid like 50, around top 50 player. Now, you could say, well, why does he want to do that when he's got a Harvard degree and he can probably go off and get a great job and make a lot more money than he will if he's ranked 50 in the world, which I guess is understandable. But yeah, I really respect what he's done with his game. A couple of other guys that I thought of. This is a weird one because I think some people in college squash think he's unbelievably good and some people maybe don't appreciate how good he is. But Mateus, who you had on recently, I think he's a really good player. He's creative. He's fun to watch. Do I think he's got the same potential as those top 6 guys that we talked about earlier? Probably not. Just because I think he's a little bit. I don't think he has the basics and the structure that they have. But like I say, he's fun to watch. He's always a threat. I mean, every time Ali Abu plays him, he has a battle. Usually goes to 5. And I'm sure he'll do reasonably well on PSA. I know he wants to play PSA, but then at the same time, I'm not sure he's a top 20 or top 30 level player at the moment, certainly. A couple of other guys I wanted to mention are 2 guys that play in our team. So our number 8 and 9 are phenomenally good players. Our number 8 is a guy called Saksham Chowdhury from India, who's now just finished. He's finished his junior year. He's still not lost a single match for Penn.
That's right. I think he's notorious around the college squash community for Penn. There's some accusations about stacking the ladder over there with him just winning all his matches.
So my defense of that, it's not a defense, it's the truth. Like, his biggest asset is his ability to lock in mentally when it matters. So on game day, he gets into some sort of like zone, like everyone talks about being in the zone. He's able to find that on a consistent basis as well as anyone I've ever worked with. And day to day, you can kind of see why he's not as good as our top sort of 4, 5, 6 players. But when it comes round to playing for the team, he plays at a phenomenal level. And his ability to concentrate and ignore the pressure. I mean, we played Princeton this season and the match went 4-all and he was the deciding match. And there's not a single guy I've ever coached that I would want to play that deciding match more than him. So he's one. He does struggle to get into that same sort of headspace that allows him to play at that level on a day-to-day basis. And even in challenge matches, I mean, that's one of the reasons he's down where he is because he consistently loses to the guys above him in challenge matches because he can't quite get to that same sort of headspace where he's fully concentrated and playing at that level. And also our number 9 also deserves a shout out. His kid that from Egypt, Roger Badour, played 9, but he was actually, so earlier in the season we had a tournament to decide our initial ladder, and he played Nick Spaziri, who ended up playing 4 for us most of the season. And Roger was either 8-7 up or 8-7 down in the 5th, and then he cramped and conceded. He had to concede that match. And he's had a few injury problems. He's obviously struggled with the transition from like the Egyptian education system to he's doing engineering, which is a really tough course at Penn, and a lot of sort of class hours. So it took him a little while to adjust to that, but he was, like I say, he could have easily played 4 or 5 for us. He was runner-up in the Egyptian Junior Nationals last year before he came to Penn.
Wow.
So for us to have a guy who's like number 2 under 19 in Egypt playing 9s, it's pretty good. But
that is really nice.
I actually expect that he'll be one of our top 3, maybe 4 players next year.
Yeah,
because he's definitely got a lot of potential, and his body's getting healthier. Like, he doesn't have any injury problems at the moment. He's still trying to get a little bit fitter, but overall, I think if he puts in a good summer's work, I think he'll be challenging Nick Spaziri and Dylan Long for our number 1, 2, and 3 spot.
Wow. Yeah, that's good to hear. Now, obviously, I must ask the other question now is most overrated players. So PSA was actually fairly straightforward. And I know everyone you asked this question to on previous episodes seems to duck the question. I'm not going to take the... Yeah, it's kind of upsetting how honestly, shout out to Andrew Douglas for straight up answering us as soon as I asked him.
I'm going to follow the Andrew model and just give you a straight answer. So my answer is Rafael Candra. Like, I looked at the rankings today. He's like 18 in the world. Never in my life do I think of him as a top 20 player. I know he's like made semis at British Open, he's beaten Marwan a few times, but just when I think of Rafael Candra, I do not think top 20. I think like maybe 30 to 40 in the world level at the best.
Wow. Yeah, no. Good answer.
Another guy that sort of stood out is Rodriguez. Now, I know he's down at like 12 in the world at the moment, but again, I don't think of him as like, his highest ranking was I think 5.
Yeah.
And I don't view him. I look at the top 5 right now, and I think it's like Tarek Momin is number 5.
Yeah.
And I know Miguel's not playing at his best these days. Like probably 4 or 5 years ago was his best period, but to me, he was never ever as good as Tarek Momin, 5 in the world. So he's another guy that, I mean, credit to him for achieving everything he's done. I mean, he's been a consistent top 10 player, which is clearly not an easy thing to do, but I don't view him as someone that's at the level of like a Shabagi, a Momin, a Gawad, those guys.
Yeah, I think actually Spencer came on yesterday and said Miguel as well.
Yeah. And then on the women's side, there's a few actually. On the women's side for overrated, Joshna Chinapa is another person that's been top 10 in the world, and I just think how. I mean, she's solid, she hits the ball pretty well, but half the time I watch her play, it's like, does she even want to play squash? Does she care? So I'm going to vote for her. And then there's another girl, and I referenced this match earlier, but a girl called Nadine Shaheen, who's the person that Amanda Sobey beat in 9 minutes. And she's like 15 or 16 in the world. I think she's 16 in the world, but the highest ranking's 15, or maybe 15 and 14, something like that. But again, I've watched her play a few times and just thought that is shocking to me that you're even in the top 30, let alone 14 or 15 in the world. So.
Well, I guess those are subject to change with a couple of CSA women players graduating this year and probably going to crack into that spot very fast.
Yeah. On the college side, I am going to ignore that part of the answer because unfortunately I coach against those players, and My partner in crime, Gilly Lane, has warned me not to say anything negative about any other teams or programs, which I've probably violated multiple times by now. But
no, for the record, everything has been positive.
He pleaded with me not to answer that question, and my one concession was like, fine, but I'm definitely giving a straight answer to the PSA one.
Oh, it's too funny. Got to get Gilly Lane on this podcast as well and see his answer. But yeah, I'm going to
give you an answer. Gilly is Mr. PC, Mr. Politically Correct, friends with everyone. The only person that Gilly ever argues with, I think, is me.
But okay, I think I'm going to wrap it up there, folks. Big thank you for Stuart for doing this. And I think this will be great to put out there and honestly gain some attention for the people viewing the tournament, because I think it is a great tournament and an important tournament.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And thanks for having me, Sean. I've enjoyed it.